Hey everybody, it's 10:30, almost, and this is John Michael Marty, and this is Nightcap number 38. No, I'm not going to say it tonight. I'm not going to say who'd have thought it. We've made it to 38, so I'm not going to say that. But it is number 38, and there's a lot going on, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of it. I hope you got plenty of wind in your sails yet, because we got a lot to talk about tonight. First off, happy birthday, Robert De Niro. He's 83 today. Sean Penn is 66. Just a couple of Hollywood rebels, a couple of Hollywood gangsters, a generation apart, both born on this day, August 17th. Speaking of gangsters, our buddy Jim Marcacci, not that he's a gangster, of course, you understand, he's appearing at the Illinois Coal Museum on Thursday. He'll be giving a talk at 10 a.m., and then he'll stick around and sign his book, talk a little more about it, answer questions. Glad to see you, and hopefully you'll stop by there at the Illinois Coal Museum in Gillespie and see Jim on Thursday beginning at 10 o'clock. And he'll have books for sale if you haven't got your copy yet. It was a busy day on the radio today. Lots of alternative news, other stuff going on. And then later on in the afternoon, we had a visit from some nice folks, Barry Schulhofer and Renee Hart from Land, Home, and Farm Group came. And they came to the radio station to film for their documentary that they're doing for American Dream TV. And I had the great opportunity to tell a bit about the radio station's beginnings and its mission, as well as a story or two about my career, so thanks to them. And I also got to meet a nice young fella by the name of James Jackson. And James works for a company called Visual Paradise Films, and their website is visualparadisefilms.com. They're basically doing the filming and the editing of the documentary that Barry and Renee are producing and starring in, which is a good deal. I think they should have that right. And it's an amazing. I saw some of the videos on their website that they have done. I saw a great documentary they did about Carlinville. And also then I was noticing a couple of the different sports things that they have done, because their vision is to do sports hype, to do videos, you know, for basketball and football teams, to play before the teams come out on the court or the field. Also to boost school districts, to talk about the good things. So they like to do sports hype, and they like to do district hype. So paradisefilms.com, visualparadisefilms.com is the name, and take a look at their website at visualparadisefilms.com, and if you see something that you like, get in touch with them, because I swear it's like Hollywood down in Muscuda. They're close by in the Metro East, and they do really, really terrific work. When I watched it, it was more than what I was expecting. They really do a good job. They're true movie makers. Cardinals must have been pooped today after taking 2 of 3 from the Cubs over the weekend, and that extreme excitement over the arrival of Joshua Baez and his 3 home runs and his first 3 at-bats on the first 3 pitches that he swung at. Amazing. Today it carried over to winning the first game from the Reds, but they lost the Nightcap, if you can call it that. It started late afternoon. But yeah, it ended after dark. They lost that one 6-5 and 10. They got 3 more games with the Reds, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So hopefully they'll be able to rebound and maybe sweep the next 3. That would be great. All right, so thanks for joining me tonight. We got a lot going on. Hi, Betty. You're always there first. Bless your heart. I'm glad to see you. That's just a pleasure to see you and everybody else who jumps on. What's on the agenda for tonight? Well, we got several fast food places locally, as you know. And somebody online talked about the best item on the menu at each of them. Now, this was somebody who did it nationwide, and so I just picked the ones that are close by to us. But there's a bunch of them, and we're going to see what they said, just one person's opinion, or maybe a group, I'm not sure. And then you can chime in, let me know if you agree or if you think, oh no, something else is a lot better. Also, Buccee's, the lovable, over-the-top travel center with 100 gas pumps and no semis, as you've ever been to one, you'll recognize. Slightly less lovable to the folks of Ohio. They're not real happy with another Ohio chain, and the Ohio chain was there first, but nonetheless, Buccee's suing them. How would you like to go out on the golf course on a beautiful day on a company outing? And while you're on the course with all of your fellow workers, you get a phone call that you've been fired or transferred. It happened. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Some of your favorite fairy tales that started out when you were a youngster, started out hundreds of years ago as horrific tales. One of them was true. I'll tell you about some of those. Also, one of the oldest companies in the world is now located in the United States. You may not be a musician, you may but you've probably heard of them and seen them in action. We'll talk about them for a moment. And also, Franz Kafka wrote some scary stuff. Familiar with that name, Franz Kafka? He wrote Metamorphosis, about a guy who went to sleep and woke up and he was an insect. That's quite a metamorphosis, wouldn't you say? But it was a famous book. If you haven't read it, you might. It was written in 1924, I think. The Trial and The Castle, two other books that Franz Kafka wrote. So he wrote some scary stuff, but he also wrote a letter to a little girl that calmed her down and changed her life. I'll tell you that story, and it's really fascinating. And also, my favorite sports writer got me to thinking, and a connection was made. I'm going to tell you about Joe Posnanski's story that he wrote, and what it uncovered and what it untangled and what it drew out for me. So that's all coming up tonight, so I hope you stick around as we do Nightcap number 38. As always, we start out with the simple stuff, the funny stuff, and then we get deeper as we go on. And if you want to let your friends know, that would be perfectly fine. So, there are 7 fast food restaurants in our area here in mid-Illinois that were on the list. There were some others that weren't. We don't have the Chipotle close by. We do have a Sonic in Springfield, but I didn't even consider that, but I'll mention it. But starting out, just the ones locally. Burger King, this was one. And Burger King, according to this group, or this survey, the best thing on the menu at Burger King is their spicy, royal, crispy chicken sandwich. Which is ironic only in the fact that it's a burger restaurant and they say the best thing on the menu is the chicken sandwich. Take that as you will. And McDonald's didn't necessarily fare any better. They say the best thing on the menu at McDonald's is the Egg McMuffin. Not only the best on the breakfast menu, but the best overall. Subway. Well, Subway at least hangs in there. They say the best thing on their menu is a meatball marinara. And I will warn you, and should say, beware. Stick 2 or 3 napkins down the front of your shirt, because marinara has a tendency to drip. At KFC, the chicken is the star, And the chicken sandwich is the best thing on the menu, according to them. Taco Bell, something with no lettuce on it, obviously. The cheesy roll-up was their choice as the best. Soft burrito, you know, just nothing but cheese. I'm sure it drips too. At Wendy's, bacon double stack. I have to agree. And at Starbucks, and I've not tried this yet. I've not even been in the Starbucks in Litchfield yet. That's a shame on me. I need to do that sometime soon. The Starbucks, they say the best thing on the menu is the bacon, Gouda, and egg sandwich. And I think that's on a brioche bun too, so that probably makes it pretty good. Gouda cheese, you know, it's not for everybody, but it's pretty good. So a bacon, Gouda, and egg sandwich at Starbucks. So there you have it. And which one of those, do you think any of those would be the best thing on the menu? Or would you have a different opinion? Like to hear that. You're welcome to comment. You know, I see a lot of your comments the next day. And that's when I comment back on them. So if I don't comment, you know, when it pops up, pardon me, but you know. Okay, next thing. Bucky's. Betty, the KFC country fried steak on Wednesday. Everybody I've talked to says that is the best thing on the menu locally. And the best bargain, without a doubt. If you can get country fried steak and mashed potatoes and coleslaw and a biscuit for $5, yeah, that's pretty darn good. We'd better not tell everybody. They may raise the price to $6 or something. But you are right, it is the best. Okay, I said Bucky's was lovable, but making some enemies. They have garnered a lot of attention for a series of lawsuits that they filed. Hey, Randy had the sandwich today, he said, the KFC chicken sandwich. Nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in. So Bucky's, and this is the story about Bucky's now. What Bucky's did is they said, we're going to go to Ohio. You know, they're a convenient mart / gas station chain located primarily in Texas, Tennessee. They pretty much around the South. They have gone to Ohio and they have sued. They've sued several, as a matter of fact. Before they've gone to Ohio, they've been suing different people. They sued a brand called Born United for an apparel line featuring a beaver that is strikingly similar to the Bucky's mascot, carrying an automatic weapon. Well, you know, Bucky's is not going for that. So the company did, at, you know, the risk of being sued, they pulled the offending products off the site. A dog park in Missouri was called Barky's, and it got shut down as a result of the lawsuit. Choke Canyon Barbecue, a San Antonio-based restaurant chain, they have a circular logo featuring a cartoon alligator. But a jury in Houston said it was too similar to Bucky's. It must have been a really poorly drawn alligator to resemble a beaver, wouldn't you think? I would. The suit that may have garnered the most negative PR, though, is the one lodged against the Mickey's convenience store chain in Ohio that has 42 locations. Now, Mickey's has a cartoon mouse. I'm sorry, a cartoon moose. I beg your pardon. A cartoon moose which has apparently coexisted with the Bucky's beaver in the convenience mart sphere for 35 years without a prior dust-up. However, now that Bucky's is going into Ohio, well, Team Beaver sued Mickey's, saying that its moose was too similar because it also featured a cartoon animal facing right with wide eyes and a smile. No word on whether the moose, and I've not seen a Mickey's moose, I've not seen whether Mickey's moose looks like a beaver or not, but evidently because it just faces right and it has big eyes and a wide smile, or wide eyes and a smile, that's the problem. So anyway, when asked about the case by the Wall Street Journal, Buccee's representative said the company doesn't comment on ongoing litigation. Well, you know, no company does. The governor of Ohio wants Buccee's to get over it, and he thinks it should drop the suit. Mickey's CEO said in a statement, "We intend to move forward as the Mickeys you've always known. We aren't going anywhere." And, however, the case is still pending, and a settlement conference is scheduled for September the 9th, so we should know something before too long, if it matters to you at all. But the point of it is, Buccee's, you know, he's lovable, but he's suing everybody who's not Buccee's, evidently. All right, so I said, the next thing, I said, how'd you like to be on the golf course on a company outing with members of your team or whatever, and you get a phone call while you're playing golf that says you're fired? What do? You finish the round, you turn your cart around and go back to the clubhouse and leave. What happens? Well, it did happen, and here's how. It was August 3rd, and this is fine print, so I'm going to put my glasses on. It was August 3rd, the day of the baseball trade deadline, and an off day on the East Coast before a series in Baltimore. About a dozen Los Angeles Angels were gathered near the first tee, ready to begin a long-awaited round of golf at the course that Tiger Woods designed for superstar Mike Trout. Little did the players realize some of them would become former Angels very soon. It seemed like every 4 or 5 holes somebody was getting the call, said Trout, who watched his team bonding event turned into one big breakup. Isn't that awful? Goodness. Trump was eager to host his teammates at his hometown of Millville, New Jersey, at his private invitation-only club. You know, when you're like a superstar like Mike Trout, you can afford to have Tiger Woods build your own private golf course for you. But anyway, he'd planned the outing in the spring. Trout National, the reserve, not Trump National, Trout National. He didn't realize the significance of the day on the baseball calendar, trade deadline day. So, nor could he know that the Angels, a team that rarely acts as sellers at the deadline, would tear it down. Suffice it to say, no team had ever experienced a deadline day like this. 3 players were traded while taking in the rolling hills of Trout National: reliever Brent Suter, outfielder Joe Adell, and reliever Ryan Zephyrdjian. A 4th reliever, Kirby Yates, learned he was dealt after the round was over while in a car heading back to Trout's home. It was pretty wild watching everybody go, said Yates. After somebody went, we just kept saying, all right, who's next? The dozen or so players who stayed overnight at Trout's home, plus coaches and staffers who arrived on a bus from Baltimore the following morning, it was at Trout National. The Angels interim general manager, John Mozeliak, as you well know, former Cardinal general manager, he was bummed. He said, I wasn't invited. I was a little tied up that morning. Well, obviously, trading all these Angels away. Mozeliak, preoccupied with the trade negotiations, didn't know nearly half his team was golfing. Trout came to realize as he organized the outing that it might be an unusual day. The group, he said, had an idea that some trades may be coming. Suter got the first call right before the players teed off. Everybody was putting on the green. We were all sitting there, all on our tee box. And Mozeliak, who conducted the calls with Angels assistant GM David Haynes, told Suter he was going to the Atlanta Braves. Suter, 36, is an 11-year veteran. The Braves are his 5th different team, but it was actually the first time he was dealt. Never in 1,000 years did he think he'd get traded, Zephyrdjian said. His first question was, can I finish the round? Can I go ahead and play? And the answer was yes. Moseliak recalled telling Suter that he'd be hearing from the Braves. Then he concluded the call by saying, "Hit 'em straight." Now, the last thing I want to tell you about this is something that you probably have been following or know about because it is a local part of the story. As the round continued, a report surfaced that left-hander Reed Detmers from Nokomis had been traded to the Cubs. For weeks, Detmers had endured speculation that he was a candidate to be traded. The report, though, turned out to be inaccurate. "I think it was good that he was golfing," said Trout, whose group included Yates and Detmers. "It took his mind off it. And when that trade with the Cubs came out, that's when we started asking questions. But we knew it wasn't legit. We were right there with him." Detmers completed his round and remained an angel. We were kind of waiting for his phone to ring, and it never did. So, that was the day on the golf course, and with apologies to Jim Nance, you can call it a deadline day unlike any other, as he would always say on about the Masters and things like that. So, there you have it. Reed Detmers is not a Cub. He is not a Cardinal. He is still an angel. I really thought he would get traded, and you may have thought the same thing, that I sure did. Okay, I said earlier that a lot of the stories, the fairy tales that we heard when we were kids, actually started out as horrific stories hundreds of years before. You know, the Brothers Grimm didn't write all of them. They heard them. They adapted them in many cases. So just in the case of Beauty and the Beast, another fairy tale with, Bronze Age origins. The story of a woman falling in love with a monster, harboring a secret that echoes. Amazing. That's that. Cinderella, of course, that story began as a royal seeking out the... Pardon me, I got to put these back on. Oh, I'm sorry. Back on Beauty and the Beast. The story was a long-winded story about a girl sent to live with a ghastly creature as a punishment for her father stealing a rose. And if you watch the animated Beauty and the Beast, you know that rose is in that bell jar. If it ever dies, before the monster, the beast, finds his true love or whatever, this will be the end. It's great. It's great. But just watch the animated Disney version. It is absolutely wonderful if you've never seen it. I used to tell people all the time it's my favorite because it's the only animated Disney that I ever saw with my kids. But now I've seen some more. Still waiting to see The Lion King. Cinderella, the story of a royal seeking out the owner of a lone piece of footwear, can be found in the ancient Egyptian tale of Rhodosis, recorded around the 1st century before Common Era by the Roman geographer Strabo, and the story later surfaced in the 9th century Chinese story of Yexin. However, it was the 17th century Italian folklore collector Giambattista Basile who helped shape the modern version of the tale with the wicked stepsisters and a gussied-up protagonist dazzling at the palace ball in Cenerentola. French author Charles Perrault further refined the plot points in his 1697 rendition, included in his collection Histories of Time Past, which featured the renamed Cinderella, as well as the fairy godmother, the pumpkin carriage, and infamous glass slippers. Yes. Although the Brothers Grimm also published the story, their versions included mutilations inflicted upon the stepsisters that understandably failed to make it into the later retellings for children. The tale of Rapunzel, you know, that's sometime compared to that of St. Barbara, a 3rd century woman who was locked in a tower to prevent her from being influenced by the spread of Christianity. A stronger connection can be found in the 10th century tale, the Persian epic Shahnameh, in which a princess lowers her hair from a palace roof to a pursuing prince. However, it was once again Buccee who gave us the contours of the modern story with Petrosinella, in which the titular long-haired princess is shuttered in a tower by an evil ogress. That's an ogre. That's a woman. One German translation of the tale changed the heroine's name to Rapunzel, which was then popularized by Brothers Grimm interpretations in the 19th century. And the last one, the one that was probably the most horrific of all because it was true, the story of the Pied Piper, a colorfully dressed musician who lures away the children of a town after he was failed to be paid for his services, earned a chapter from the Brothers Grimm before becoming the subject of a famous 1842 poem by Robert Browning. However, this fairy tale has its definitive roots in a real-life event. According to records in the German town of Hamelin on June 26, 1284, some 130 children were led away by a multicolored clad piper and never returned. 130 kids hauled away. That's incredible. Now, they never returned. Historians have since tried to determine what may have transpired, with theories ranging from the vanishing being part of a population migration to a peculiar dancing mania that prompted afflicted people to flail around until the point of exhaustion or even death. Wow. But the real answer to this centuries-old mystery will likely never be known, adding another layer of intrigue to a fairy tale that retains an ominous undercurrent even today. Okay. So that's that. One of the oldest companies in the world is currently located in the United States. You might not be a musician, but you've probably heard of them or maybe seen them in action, and that company is Zildjian. Zildjian makes cymbals. While few American companies come close to matching the age of older institutions, the cymbal manufacturer, Zildjian, stands out not only as one of the oldest companies located in the U.S., but also as the world's oldest continuously operating manufacturer of musical instruments. They were founded in Constantinople, now Istanbul, in 1623 by Armenian alchemist and metalsmith Avedis Zildjian, who discovered a durable metal alloy that could make crisp musical sounds without shattering. Zildjian became an established company in the Ottoman Empire and later began selling cymbals in many major European capitals. Then in the 1920s, the family cymbal-making business relocated to Massachusetts under the ownership of Avedis III, just in time for the Jazz Age. And the company, currently run by the 15th generation of the family, is now the world's largest maker of cymbals and drumsticks, too. So, how about that? Okay. I said when I started, I was going to also tell you a story about a guy who wrote some scary stuff, Franz Kafka, but about a story he wrote to a little girl that changed her life. When I read this for the first time, some time ago, I always saved it, and I said, I'm going to tell this someday. Somebody who's going to pay attention, I think they might enjoy it, and I hung on to it, and I ran across it today, and I said, this will be perfect for Nightcap. So here it comes. When Franz Kafka was 40 years old, he had never married, had no children, And he was walking through the park in Berlin when he met a girl who was crying because she had lost her favorite doll. Now, Franz Kafka lived from 1883 to 1924. Some of his most famous works were even published posthumously. So this was a long time ago, over 100 years. The girl had lost her favorite doll, and she and Kafka were searching for the doll. He was helping her look unsuccessfully. Kafka told her to meet him there the next day, and they would come back to look for her. The next day, when they had not yet found the doll, Kafka gave the girl a letter written by the doll, saying, "Please don't cry. I took a trip to see the world. I will write to you about my adventures." Now, understand, he'd never met this girl. He was taking a walk in the park. The girl was looking for a doll. She was crying. He must not have been a bad guy, even though he wrote some really scary stories. But this began a story that continued until the end of Kafka's life. During their meetings, Kafka would read the letters of the doll carefully, written with adventures and conversations that the girl found adorable. Finally, Kafka brought back the doll. He bought one that had returned to Berlin. She said, "It doesn't look like my doll at all." Kafka handed her another letter in which the doll wrote, "My travels have changed me." The little girl hugged the new doll and brought the doll with her to her happy home. And a year later, Franz Kafka was dead. Many years later, the now adult girl found a letter inside the doll. In the tiny letter signed by Kafka, it was written, "Everything you love will probably be lost, but in the end, love will return in another way." Embrace the change. It's inevitable for growth, and together we can shift pain into wonder and love, but it's up to us to consciously and intentionally create that connection. So, what an interesting story about Franz Kafka. Now it makes me want to read the Metamorphosis to see the other side of the man. One of my favorite sports writers. Man, we're at 11 o'clock already. I got to hustle here. One of my favorite sports writers, and probably my favorite one, quite frankly, still one of, is Joe Posnanski, former KC Royals beat writer. He was a magician, historian. He wrote a great book on Houdini. And a forlorn fan of the Cleveland Browns and the Guardians. He digs rock and roll and writes great books like the Baseball 100, featuring not the best players, but the best moments over 100 years, 185 years. Joe Posnanski is also currently running columns about the 100 best baseball movies. And this week, the one that he mentioned was Trouble with the Curve. And you may remember that movie. He didn't like it at all, but there is a connection to me, and anytime I can make a connection to a movie or a game, I will. That's human nature. Here's some of Joe's words. "I imagine everything I'm about to write you've already read somewhere, but I'll write it anywhere. Anyway, Eastwood portrays the scout who has signed every single good Atlanta Braves player ever. Ralph Gard, Dale Murphy, Tom Glavine, Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, Jared Jurgens. You kind of had to wonder why the Braves even had a scouting department when this guy could do it all himself. Anyway, Eastwood's getting old and he's beginning to lose his eyesight, but he's still beating the bushes because he's a baseball genius, and he gets help from his daughter, and his daughter happens to like another scout who's younger, and they're both after the same guy. Well, anyway, Joe goes on to say that Clint should have played a scout named Clint Eastwood because that's just what the old curmudgeon did. He played himself, as he has done in quite a few movies lately. He could have given a performance from his couch, so to speak. I thought it was a good movie too, Randy. I liked it very much. Anyway, he thought it was bad, but here's where the connection comes in. So, John, how do you feel connected to this movie? Well, here's the really cool part, in my mind. When I was a freshman in high school, playing varsity baseball for dear old Ramsey High, my friends, Mike Casey, George Holliday, John Wayne Denton, and I, we were freshmen playing on the varsity. The four of us were as thick as thieves, I guarantee you, since day one of first grade, having spent the previous 9 summers playing baseball every day school was out, enjoying the knowledge and not quite good enough to, I want to make sure I said this right. We enjoyed the knowledge and the coaching of a not quite good enough minor league baseball player turned high school baseball assistant coach named Tony DeMacio. What I'm saying is, our assistant coach in high school was a young man named Tony DeMacio. He was hardly older than us. He might have been 24 or 25. I think this was his first teaching assignment. But we loved Tony DeMacio. He wasn't, like I say, he wasn't that much older than us. And after a year, he moved on to coach closer to his home in McKees Rock, closer near Pittsburgh, McKees Rock, Pennsylvania. So what about the connection? Well, Tony DeMacio, after a few years of coaching, really was a good ball player, and the Atlanta Braves hired him as a scout. He was a good scout. He was good at whatever he did, including scouting. That guy Clint Eastwood played should have been named Tony DeMacio, because over 20 years plus, Tony DeMacio worked his way up to director of scouting for the Braves and was, a couple of years ago, elected to the Braves Hall of Fame. Because he signed Tom Glavine, a second-rounder in 1994, and Chipper Jones, number 1 overall in 1990. He also worked for the Cubs from 1995 to 1998, and he signed Kerry Wood and John Garland. And during a short stint at Cleveland, he signed Manny Ramirez. He did know talent. For some reason or other, he never took me or John or Mike or Pidge with him. Amazingly, Tony DeMacio was not the only professional athlete to coach at Ramsey High School. Back in 1959, I think 1960. 1960 to 1963, Ramsey High School had a basketball coach named Don Anilak. Played at Missouri State and later drafted by the New York Knicks of the NBA. He was the basketball coach, and his reputation was known as a coach who could turn a team around in a season. And he did that at Ramsey, and he did that later at Williamsville High School. It was Ramsey for 3 years. He was at Williamsville for either 6 or 9. And his full name was Donald Robert Moose Anilak. My brother Lawrence played for Don Anilak. Said he taught him more basketball than anybody had a right to. He was a great coach. And as I said, that was straight from a basketball website called Peach Basket History, talking about every NBA player, every college player who was anybody. And they said he had the knack of turning losers or redoing programs, making them very good. And he did. So that's it for tonight. That was a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't know where everybody was, or nobody just bothered to sign in. But that's okay. I'm sure that I'll hear about it tomorrow. And I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll do it again next Monday. Number 38 is done. Stick a fork in it, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great night, and remember, I love you. All you got to do is pass it on. Bye-bye.